One of the big questions we got in as people registered was, what are some of the alternatives? What would be a different way? So next, Alicia will talk about how this could be done better.
Hi, everyone. You've probably seen some of the posters that were put around at different parks and everything saying there has to be a better way. Well, that's because we were really looking for this, and that was part of what I wanted to get involved in, was finding out what ways were better. Because the more you learn is that climate change is affecting communities all over a country like us, and that we all want to stay safe. We all want flood protection, and everybody who's been really digging into this wants that. But what we're also learning is that we don't want solutions that tear our natural world apart. And that's really important. And for me, it was, I want to see if that was possible. Can we find a win-win? Can we bring erosion control and flood protection and keep our river? We have amazing ecologists and engineers in our country. Can they collaborate together? And it turns out that they can, and they do. So let's go to the next slide. So this whole history of erosion control in our country has been mostly approached using riprap and concrete. But in the last 10 or 15 years, there's been a shift in the types of solutions that we use, and people are starting to think about ways that natural methods can be used for flood protection. And these are called nature-based solutions. And the goal with them is to work with nature rather than to take it out, because nature actually helps. So you can go to the next slide here. Next slide. So it's important to know that the approach is kind of new. So it was only about 13 years ago, or around 2011 or 2011, that it even began to be researched. And this graph shows, I put an arrow in that spot because that's when a lot of the work was finalized for the project that we're all talking about. So nature-based solutions was hardly even on the map when this whole project was designed. But meanwhile, in the last decade, this is getting really important. So you go to the next slide. Our federal government is starting to focus on this. In 2022, at the COP27, the White House announced and said, we've got to do our erosion control better. And we want all of our agencies, and you can see all of them down across the bottom. They said, we want nature-based solutions. And then not just that, but we want to provide funding and grants to do it. So I think that's important if we talk about, hey, this is a costly thing. The federal government is saying they want to support this. And they want it because it works. There's good science behind it. And it's a win-win. The community loves them. These types of results, because it doesn't disrupt all of the nature around us, but it also helps with erosion control. So lots of agencies were already seeing, you can go to the next slide, how important this was, including all of these. And look at the big one right here. The U.S. Army Corps of Engineers was a huge part of engineering with nature-based solutions. And they created a program called Engineering with Nature. And I want to tell you about it. And after I'm done presenting, I'll put some links in the chat that you can hopefully look and see for yourself. You can go to the next slide. Engineering with Nature was spearheaded by the Corps about 13 years ago under the leadership of the man that is my new hero. His name is Dr. Todd Bridges. He is the new celebrity in my book because of what he's done. I mean, go to the next slide so you can see his nice picture. That's Todd. Oh, I'm sorry, Dr. Todd Bridges. He wanted to find a way to move away from this approach. And if you saw that quote I had a little bit earlier about the old methods for erosion control versus a new approach, this was all him. He represented the Army Corps, and he wanted to find these new ways to do natural-based erosion control. And he literally wrote the textbook on Engineering with Nature, along with people from different agencies from England and the Netherlands. They all got together and said, let's come up with a textbook that teaches everybody what the best practices are for doing this, how to get, what kinds of solutions work, and how you go about the process. So go to the next slide. So that's the textbook. You can actually go on their website and download this textbook and read it yourself. They also have 5-minute little chapter videos where you can just hear somebody talk in very plain language that's easy for people just like me, who is not an engineer, to understand what some of these concepts are. And it is chock full of all sorts of ideas for ways that we can incorporate things into this. I want to talk about the guiding principles because you'll see why this ties in. It's guided by 5 things. I'm going to focus on 3. The first is a whole systems approach. It means that when you do a project, when the U.S. Army Corps does a project, they want them to see it as a whole system, not just one part. This is a whole watershed. And we haven't really gone into this yet, but we need to remember this project doesn't live in a vacuum. Much of it was built around a decision to hold more water in Folsom Dam at a given time. And that would send that water to other people in our state. And that was a decision that made our community and our river more vulnerable. And we did not have a seat at that table. So that is not a systems approach. Then there's the part about finding multiple benefits and solutions that add value to a community rather than take away from it. And when you look at the examples in the books and in another spot I'll show you, you would want the kinds of work that they do to be in your backyard because they make it better than they started. Another, and I think critical piece, is this principle about engaging with communities. The guidance that he says, and you go to the next slide so you can see it in the introduction from the Army Corps, it says, start early and have frequent engagement with stakeholders and affected communities. It's central to innovation. And why does he say it's so important? He said it's because the community is the one paying for these projects, and because they're the ones that are going to be most affected by them. They're going to come up with good solutions that fit, because circumstances are not one size does not fit all. Doesn't that sound like a kind of a solution that we all want for this? So let me go on. Let me tell you a little bit more about this amazing program. I'm going to keep bragging about the Army Corps. This is their coffee table brag book. It's called their Engineering with Nature Atlas. And Dr. Bridges decided, he was like, everybody said, you need to make these books. And it's like a coffee table brag book of all of their different projects that they've done. And he has this whole video. You click on each of these and you can watch him talk. You can watch the head of the Army Corps talk about these engineering with nature solutions. Watch them all yourself so you can see. But I want to read a quote to you that he said, and I want you to think. Go to the next slide, because I have the picture of the work down the river as I read this. The majority of people do not view projects through the lens of equations and data tables. And he's speaking to the Army Corps as he's saying this. He says that's a purview of technicians and scientists like ourselves. They view projects with their eyes. Projects are what they see and what they see it doing. He wanted people to see what a good project would look like, along with many others on his team. And in these atlas, there's 118 projects. I didn't have time to read through them. Like many of you, I'm working while I'm studying all of this stuff, but I am setting you loose. Go look at them yourself and see what you can find, because half of them are done by the Army Corps. So for the sake of time, I just want to show you one, because I think it's a great example of what we're all looking for from this project on our river. It's not the same story, and I understand that. I'm not an engineer, but what I think it does show you is the type of quality work that can be done to come up with a good solution. So this is Dry Creek in Sonoma County. It's not far from here. It was a highly regulated creek for flood control, but they also had some important work that they had to do to preserve the steelhead and the salmon that were running up these creeks. So in the atlas, they go through 4 different traits of each of these, and I'm going to just highlight 3. And I'm going to take it straight from the atlas. It's like page 200 and something, in atlas number 2. So scroll to the next slide. So first, they talk about how they use natural processes. So you're going to see they use all these complex habitats with logs and plantings so that the fish have a place to go and spawn. But then let's go to the next thing they do. This is the best. They said they added benefit. It actually improved the aesthetics and environmental value. So they have this whole part on every single project. They talk about how it added benefit to the community. And in this one, it became like this highlight for Sonoma County. People actually now come there and walk on this trail because it's so beautiful. It actually brought tourism to the area. Okay, next slide. Then this one, promoting collaboration. This is the coolest part of the story. They worked with all the landowners that owned the land around this area, and they had tons of public meetings. They got demonstrations. They went out to the creek and showed them what it was, and they got support. And look at this part highlighted. It says they were, because of, originally landowners were skeptical about future limitations associated with the activities. But because of their experience with this project, they've asked to participate in larger restoration projects handled by the U.S. Army Corps. That's the kind of project I want to be behind. How did they do this? They got into the details. And I'm going to show you, let's look at the pictures of what they gave their community. Go to the next slide. This is just from the brochure that the neighbors in this community got. Look at the detail on it. Look at how well it's laid out. And it's a part of a whole handbook that they gave the community so that they could follow along and see. That's the kind of detail we need. Keep going. Let's look at another one. Here's a plan. If you're an architect, you can look at all the details. They've counted every single tree. They've seen where everything's going. I can click on this and go into it and see every single part of this project. Keep going. Let's look at another one. Here's one that they also gave as a part of their project plan. There's a budget included. There's a legend that helps you see. This is the type of detail that we need to see for this kind of a project. Next slide. This is what we're getting. This is from our report. And the truth is, the further you zoom in, the less detail you get with this project. This does not meet the standards. And we have the model under the nose of the Army Corps. It's led by the Army Corps. We need to get the leader of this engineering with nature. We need to get all of them on the phone and helping with this project. So my next slide is, our community is not pixelated, and this project shouldn't be either. We need the detail that's required, the research detail, the intention. And if we got to the end of it and we still saw that we can do it, we're going to find a great solution that's still going to add benefit. And I'm going to end with this. On the engineering with nature, they have this spot called Proving Grounds. And in this area, they go and show all the different places around our country that they are celebrating the ways they're using engineering with nature. And there's a handy little spot that's open. There's 8 projects. One is right nearby in San Francisco. I want the American River to be on that. We're spending lots of our funds to do that. We should be known. We're California. We can do this. So with that said, I think that's the end of my part of the presentation.